Hi, this is Dr. Kimberley Linert, and you're listening to Incredible Life Creator Podcast. My guest today is Jeff Zigman. Jeff Zigman has been a tech entrepreneur for about 9 years, working professionally as a business analyst and a software engineer, designing software, leading and directing teams, and taking more than 25 software products from the idea phase to the market, often either in a role of chief technology officer or a director of software development. Welcome to the podcast, Jeff.
Thanks. Thanks for having me.
Yes. As we talked about before we got on, you're in the cold Montreal where there's snow, and I'm in Atlanta where it's about 50 degrees.
Yeah,
Oh boy.
snowy and white outside. I'm preparing for a long winter.
Yes, yes. So people can get to know you. Tell us about you, where you started out, how you got to be doing what you're doing now.
Sure. I studied engineering in university. Here we call it university. I think in the U.S. people call it college. I did engineering, and then a few years after graduating, I ended up starting in software as a business analyst. What a business analyst does is they gather business requirements. So anytime a software project needs to get done, for example, if you don't gather the business requirements, it's kind of like a ripple effect where everything else goes wrong. It's kind of like not getting. So you have like requirements and then specifications. It's kind of like if you're making a building and you don't gather the needs of what somebody wants and then create a blueprint, everything else is going to go wrong after that. And so that's actually a way that usually people start software the wrong way. They usually hire a developer and hope that everything's going to go well, and then when they're surprised when everything goes badly. I got started off in my career as a business analyst, and then I got into all different parts of software. I went the entrepreneurial route. As soon as I learned, I know how to design software now, then I started doing my own tech startups. I've done a number of them. As the bio, I've taken more than 25 software products from like the idea phase at the beginning when it's like, okay, what are we supposed to be building, up until market ready. And Skill Builder, I started during COVID, a couple months into it. And I started it came from another idea, and then it developed into this. And then I realized that from my knowledge on the martial arts side of how to teach and how people learn things more effectively, that I could create a more effective way of people to learn more quickly for anything that's pretty much skill based.
Mhm.
And that's where I'm at. I've gotten a bunch of people. I've spoken to more than 100 people in different domains with some really interesting skill sets. I have a couple of people who are live or going live with I call it a workshop as opposed to a course, just because people usually associate courses as like long videos, and mine is it's a lot more involved, learning step by step, bit by bit, piece by piece. So yeah, that's kind of where I'm at now, and it's exciting. Get to help people teach more effectively and help other people learn more quickly and more effectively, which is exciting.
That is really exciting. And right now, with all the parents home, wishing someone could help them. Oh, it's so needed. It's so
Yeah.
needed.
At the moment, I haven't targeted young, like children education wise. I've been targeting, like I have one person, his name's Alex Stryler. He's an expert in getting racing sponsorships. So he's live, he's getting purchases already. I have another person who is an expert in optimizing like LinkedIn profiles for people transitioning out of the military. He's helped about 10,000 people do that. So we're creating one so that we can actually help all of them. And
Wonderful. Yes.
a
And
number of
that
other things,
is,
really interesting topics like that.
that is wonderful, because I am one of those very patriotic people, and I think we should thank our military, be grateful for our military, and anything we can do to help them because of all the dedication they've committed to us and our
Mhm.
country. So,
I'm from
so wonderful.
Canada, but it's the same thing. It's all for it's North America. Very similar. We're like the small younger brother upstairs.
Yeah, 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 you really are. And I actually grew up in Michigan, and our city was right across from Canada, from Sarnia. And so to us, it was all the same. There was just a bridge between us. So we'd go to Canada all the time to eat or do activities or, have friends there. And Canadians always came to our side. So to me, it was almost, even though it's a different country, it was almost the same living in that situation.
Yeah, colder here though.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. It's a little cold in Michigan too. Not as cold as Montreal though.
Yeah.
So, yeah, so let's talk about the martial arts. How did you actually get started in martial arts? Any reasons for it, or were you just interested?
Yeah, I was always interested in it. I didn't start till I was 18. So and someone I knew someone I had met at camp had told me about a school that he went to, which happened to be close to my to where I lived. And then
Mhm.
when I got back home from camp, I ended up checking it out and kind of fell in love the first day with it. And then I got very lucky with the school I landed on, and yeah, I've been there ever since, and it's I've learned a lot. It's shaped my character. It's shaped. I tell my wife that if she had met me before I started, I don't think she would have married me at that
Wow, that's a
point.
huge change, huge transformation. Wow,
Yeah.
what kind of martial arts is it that you practice?
So it's kind of, you know what MMA is?
Hmm.
Mixed martial arts. So it's kind of like that, but in more of it, like with more of a street mentality as opposed to a sportive way of mentality, and in more of a traditional setting as opposed to a gym setting. That I find is the best way of describing it.
Wow. So you took those lessons that you learned in that background and integrated it into the software to help people learn.
Yeah, so what I found was that when I was showing people a series of movements or a certain thing, and then when what I found is that when people teach, like, let's say 5 movements in a row, there's almost no retention, and it's almost impossible for the person to follow along effectively, and they don't get it. Okay, and it's a, except for some people are just naturals and they'll catch on better, fine, but in general that's not the case. But when you teach one thing to somebody and then get them repeat, and then get the next one, and then and you keep building on it, the speed with which the person can actually learn the new thing is, you don't, you can't kind of understand it until you've actually seen it and compared it with, this thing would have taken an hour, 2 hours, 3 times, and the person just learned it in 3 minutes.
Oh, that's amazing.
Yeah. So
You
and
learn
what
anything in 3 minutes.
you can't learn anything in 3 minutes, but one of the things I tell all the experts I'm working with is like, is, when you're learning a new skill, it can take months or years to get it right.
Yes.
And one of the biggest reasons is because people spend a lot of time getting really good at the mistakes, right?
Ah,
Because you do things that you shouldn't be doing in the process, and you miss things that you should be doing. And when you do it wrong and you spend months doing it wrong, you're not going to get results, and it's going to take a very, very long time, and you probably won't it could take you years to get to something right. Like, I'll take the martial arts kind of thing. So if my sifu is my, like, sensei, so
uh-huh.
if they show me how to do a certain move properly, and then they see it correct and they give a correction, if they don't give that correction, I'm going to spend the next year, 2 years, 3 years doing it wrong. And it's only through my own figuring it out, hopefully someday, years down the line, that I'll do it. But when they correct me in the spot, no, don't do it that way, do it this way, immediately I now start doing it the right way. So I'm actually potentially years ahead just from that little correction than I would be otherwise. So when you have all those little corrections all done at the beginning, you can get it right the first time and then save those months or years that it would otherwise
Mm.
take you to do.
Yeah, and that makes total sense to me. So for several years, I did CrossFit, which is a group exercise type of thing for people who don't know what it is. But and it was like lifting weights, doing deadlifts or lifting, doing overhead press.
Mhm.
Um, and whenever we started with something new, and even when we didn't, if we were just reviewing something, every time we'd go, before we would use a weight that was heavy, we would use these just plastic bars, and we would practice the technique over and over and over again, doing correctly. And the judge, the coach would judge how we were doing it and just do that exact thing is, make sure we're doing it correctly. And then when we were doing it correctly over and over, then he said, okay, now we can use some weight.
Mhm.
And later on, I went to another CrossFit gym just visiting for a while. And they said to me, man, your technique is so amazing. How do you get such good technique? Because I'm not very tall. I'm about 5'1", so I'm not that big of a person. And they're like, but your technique is fabulous. I'm like, yeah, because I had a really good teacher. He made sure everything was done safely and done correctly. And what you're saying is important, because I can't imagine doing it wrong and all the injuries that happen, or in the case of learning something, believing or having limiting beliefs, or believing something about something and doing it wrong, and not understanding all the confusion it would cause if you didn't do it correctly the first time.
Yeah, that can, and if you think about it in the business world, that could lead to literally months of time and money investment, and sometimes years of doing things wrong right from the beginning. But if you like, imagine if you learn some. So I'll give you an example. So the guy who I'm working with, who his name is Matt Shearer, he's the one who's doing the LinkedIn military profile. Okay, so there's a whole bunch of people who, let's say that they're learning to put their LinkedIn profile as a resume, okay? And that's not the way to do LinkedIn, right? Because if you do that on LinkedIn, people are going to go over your profile, they're going to look at the next one, it's boring, and you're not going to, the chance of you getting a bunch of interviews and so on is very low, right?
Mhm.
So you could have someone who's trying to do this transitioning process, and they might spend the next 6 months getting very few interviews, nothing
Mhm.
happening, no attention, and they're like, LinkedIn doesn't work for me. But if you just spend an hour, get it right the first time, you'll have recruiters coming to you, wanting to connect with you. They'll
Mhm.
see my thinking, like is that the skill sets that you get in the military are so much higher than what the average person who doesn't go through the military gets. But
Mhm.
there's this kind of disconnect where the person who's coming from the military doesn't know how that translates to civilian life, and the civilian
Mhm.
life people in the business world don't necessarily know how to place them effectively.
Mhm.
But if you've led teams of 50 or 200 people through complex operations with minute details and so on, your level of knowledge of how to do things at a complex level, I think, is much higher than somebody in the business world or a standard work environment who hasn't gone through that. And a lot of it's a matter of how to frame your expertise in an exciting way that will appeal to people, and then you're going to have people running after you to get a job. So that's just one
Mhm.
example of, yeah.
That's wonderful. And earlier when you said, take 1 hour, work on your LinkedIn and all the months. And, first of all, when I think of that, for either the military looking for a job or a business person who wants to expand or disseminate what they're doing, the amount of money that it would cost, that's a huge cost. Doing something wrong is a huge cost. And
People don't
like you
think
said,
about it.
in time, in money, and even emotional upset. Because think about when you're doing something and you're doing it and doing it and you're doing it the best you know how, and you keep running into walls, how frustrating that can be, and how emotionally, an emotional toll even.
People actually don't really think about that a lot of the time, because when they see a price tag, even if the price tag makes sense, what they're thinking about, oh, should I invest in this? But they don't really think about the the ramifications of not investing in it. So like, imagine if you get a job 3 months earlier or 6 months earlier because of that, and if you're making only $2,000 per month, let's say, or $1,000 per month, then the investment of whatever it is, if it's 200 or whatever it is to do that, is a small fraction of all the extra money you're going to be making. But people don't think about it that way a lot of the time, and then they're like, okay, I'm just going to try a free option, and then free, you get what you pay for when you take the free option, right?
That's true. That's
Yeah.
true.
Yeah.
And I can, even imagine in like families, if you have a husband or wife that doesn't have a job and things are tight, then people have, you know, fights, or
Yeah.
it can cause a lot of stress and strain. So just having an expert who can lead you through it, and with your technique, more quickly and more easily, with less stress or angst,
Yeah.
is wonderful.
100%. One thing I found is that any skill has that there's sort of an innate natural aptitude, and there's a technique. So eh, the technique part is, and they're very different. So like, let's say you take the best mixed martial arts fighter or whatever, someone who's a natural fighter is going to be able to do better naturally than someone who's not, right? But technique, anyone can learn. If you learn the technique, you can get good at something. So the person who is not naturally good at something but learns the technique, they might never be as good as the person who's a natural who also learns the technique, because those are the people who are always at the top of the world, at the top of their game, the ones who are natural who also perfect the technique. The people who are naturals but don't perfect the technique are the ones, they'll never be as good as the naturals who do perfect the technique. And it's possible that the people who are naturals might be competitive with the people who have perfect technique but are not naturals. But so you can't affect the natural part, but you can learn that anyone can learn technique, and that's the part that this focuses on. It's getting the technique right.
Wonderful. So how do you put that in as a software builder? How do you put that together?
Are you asking how did I put it in, or how do I turn that into software?
Right. How do you turn that into software?
So that's not a simple thing, because when it comes to software, you need to be able to create something exactly, which is hard to do. The only reason I can do that is because I have all those years of experience as a business analyst and a software engineer and directing software. So like I know how to convert the idea that I have in my head of what I want to try to accomplish into software, just because I was fortunate enough to have those different areas of expertise. But it's the way you have to do it in software is a little different from reality, because in reality, if you're doing martial arts, for example, then you're taking someone through a repetitive act over and over. But that might annoy a lot of people to the point where you can drive them away from using the software platform and get them really frustrated. So the key, what I did is I had to figure out a way to pull people through the experience in a way that it doesn't frustrate them, but helps them learn that process bit by bit. And yeah, I've gone through more than 200 iterations based on watching people using it, based on examining what they're interacting, how they're not interacting, what they're touching, what they're not clicking on. People think that software is like, okay, I'll hire a developer. They don't know how much fine tuning it takes, and working with users and seeing what frustrations they're having in order to actually perfect something so that it's a fluid experience.
Wow. So when you're going to work with someone and they have a something they want someone to learn, what are the steps to that? Do you start out, okay, this is the concept? How do you actually help them to communicate to you what they need so you can actually create it?
So what I found is in the creation process, to create this kind of story structure is not easy, and it's hard enough to the point where I initially tried giving the content creators I was working with like a rough idea of, okay, try this, and I found 100% of the time they would get it wrong. Not just because it's hard to do, and I would leave them for a couple of days. It's like, okay, try to do this, and then I'd find that they just spent an hour or two going in the wrong direction, and then we have to repeat it, redo it. So the way I do it now is I extract the information. I use the business analyst skills that I picked up over the years to extract the right information, and then we do several meetings to add to the content to give it so that it keeps to the structure in the right way, so that the ending result produces something that conforms to the right kind of structure there.
Wow. And then once you have this software produced for someone, is it something where it's just produced and then it just runs? Or is it something where it's produced, but then you maybe would do like a maintenance agreement with them where, you would be tweaking or changing or continuing to evolve?
Yeah, so we actually do an iterative process for each, I call it workshops that is produced. So we lay the foundation for it in terms of the content of what it should be teaching, and then we go through all the ins and outs of it in more detail, and then we release it to people, and then we get feedback and do an iterative process, gathering feedback and seeing what's missing, what might be unclear, so we can perfect. And the goal there is we're trying to create something that is teachable in a scalable way, and where the word scalable is often kind of thrown around a lot. To me, the only thing scalable is software. And like if you have 10,000, if you have 1,000 users and you need to get to 1 million, you just upgrade the server. You don't have to multiply your work for your manpower 1,000 times in order to accommodate, right? So the question is, how do you get that in the learning process? And the only way to do that is if it takes 0 minutes of your time to teach that thing to somebody. Because once you do that, then you can teach 1 million people as easily as you can teach 10, right? And that's where it gets really interesting also from a business opportunity standpoint, because if you're trading your time for money, usually what people who are training, what they do is they use their online courses to try to use that as a gateway into the training, because there's more money in the training for one-on-one and so on. But you're still trading your time for money like that. Whereas in this way, you're making less from each person, which is better for the person who's paying it, right? Because it's easier for them, it's more accessible. And if you teach 1 million people and you're charging $99 for that person to learn it, that's $100 million. It's a lot more scalable, and that's where it gets really exciting also.
Yeah. So as part of the consulting you do with people, do you help them as far as the marketing piece to actually, since they're going to have to attract a larger number of people as opposed to high ticket where you only need a few? Do you help them at all with that piece?
So that was actually an initial problem that I had to figure. I found a solution to it, which I'll tell you in a second. So the problem was, so I'm only working with people who already have a following of people who know about their expertise, who see them as an expert and would want to learn that expertise from them. But let's say you have hundreds of people or thousands of people who know your expertise in that domain. Reaching out to them can be extremely time consuming. So I had a few months ago, I had someone spent about 2 or 3 hours trying to manually reach out to 100 people. It's very time consuming, right? So over the last year and a half, do you know what LinkedIn automation is?
Why don't you explain it? Because there might be people listening who don't.
Okay, so LinkedIn is really powerful as a tool. It took me, I spent a long time on LinkedIn not being able to use or leverage it effectively. I think a lot of people struggle with that, months without knowing how to use it effectively. And then I came across people who are providing a service where they would use LinkedIn automation tools, which can send out at scale many connection requests or messages to form new connections. Before it would be like, okay, try to connect, add a note, send, and then you try to connect manually with each person, but that's extremely time consuming, right? And you can't really do that at scale. Tons of people will never even see it. Tons of people will never respond or accept it. And it's a numbers game, right? You have to reach out to a lot of people in order to get a smaller amount confirming or saying yes, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I hired somebody to do the LinkedIn automation for me. They got no results. I spent like $750. So they charge anywhere from typically from like at least from $400 to $1,500 per month to do this. So I paid one guy $750, got a refund from that one. Then I paid another company like $375. They also got no results. I'm like, okay, I'm going to try to do this myself. Took me about 4 months of experimentation, of trial and error, losing leads, seeing what works and what doesn't. You know, LinkedIn has its own way of communicating. And it's very easy to turn people off or give them too much information or spam them in the wrong. Give it things in a way that's spamming them, which you don't want to spam them just because you don't want to spam them and because you don't want them to feel like they're being spammed, right? The idea is to see if there's an opportunity to be done between you and them, right? So I kind of nailed that down to a science, and then I was like, okay, maybe I could do this for the content creators I'm working with so that it can get the ball rolling. But then if I do that, I have to take away from my own LinkedIn automation that I'm doing, which will cost me money. So I'm like, you know what? Why don't I use Skill Builder to create a LinkedIn automation workshop where people can actually learn it themselves. So then I did that, tested on people, and since then I've actually been able to get multiple content creators I'm working with doing this, and this is how we have tons of responses coming in. And looks like it takes roughly about 90 minutes or so to get through. I've had people who are not at all technical go through, and they're able to come out the other side understanding what to do, how to do it, and then also how, not just on the software side, because a lot of non-tech people are always worried about whether they'll be able to learn the software side. That's a roadblock. So I've had non-tech people go through it and learn the software side without a problem, and then how to take over the conversations more effectively to actually communicate with people once the automated side ends. So yeah. So
that's wonderful, because you know, that's what, as a business owner, that's what I would think of. I think, okay, I got this great software, but how do I get it to people? And that's a huge.
So I've actually been able to open up hundreds of connections. Like 1 month, I've made a post on LinkedIn a week or two ago where I got more than 800 connections, targeted connections in 1 month on LinkedIn, and I've been able to repeat that successfully. Again, I'm getting other people to do the same kind of thing as well, so it's going well.
Yeah, as you're talking about it, I'm thinking that's almost unbelievable.
It is.
I've been trudging along, putting notes to people, and I'm like 800.
Yeah, it's the same kind of thing, because like it took me about 4 months of trial and error to figure out how to do it right. So like, okay, you're gonna go through 4 months of trial and error and hopefully figure it out, or take 90 minutes. It's the amount of business you generate from, like, if you get one deal out of all these hundreds, then it pays for itself many times over. So yeah, it's going very well there. It's going successfully, and I'm using that as a mechanism to be able to get all the content creators to get started very quickly, so that we can get responses in a week of interest level instead of waiting a month or two with nothing.
Oh, that's beautiful. I love that.
Yeah.
So you want to give some other examples of people that you've worked with, or how the software works?
Okay, so who am I working with now? So there's Alex Stryler, who is an expert in the racing sponsorships industry. He's nailed how to get sponsors, like big sponsors, down to a science, and apparently 99% of people do it wrong, completely wrong, and they achieve no results. And if there's a method to how to do it properly where you can get results. And once you go through it, it's pretty straightforward and clear. There's the LinkedIn military profiles. I'm working with another, so his name is Matt Shearer, the one who's helped 10,000 to date. Hopefully we'll be able to help hundreds of thousands every year. John Hansen, his expertise is in customer experience, customer service. So most people approach that in a way that is not the most effective, and he's been training people. He's trained more than 500 people on how to do it. He used to do it more extensively in a consulting capacity, and people don't approach it in the best in an ideal way for the best results. And like when I'm going through each step with him, I'm like, I can see at least 40 or 50 ways where people are going to do this process wrong and spend years achieving significantly worse results than they could achieve just by starting it right. So, and I see that with pretty much every single person I'm teaching. And I've had people tell me that by going through the process with me, it has helped them flesh out their ideas better, more of exactly how to do it.
Just getting the clarity.
Yeah.
And I love you engineering minds, because you can pull the details out like nobody. And that is wonderful, because I'm one of those general visionary, like, oh, I got this idea and I want this, and this, and I can see it. But I need someone like you to pull the details out. It's like, what are you really talking about?
As far as the learning process goes, so the good or bad thing, depending how you look at it, is I can't explain it, and you have to actually go through the learning process of one of the workshops, and that's why it actually required for me to sell someone on the idea of wanting to partner on Skill Builder. It requires at least 2 meetings, because I can't explain it to them in a way that they'll understand and feel it. But as soon as they go through it, I'm like, the people who have really tried to teach things to other people, they're like, I get it, I love it, what's the next step? But they can't see that until they go through it, because when they go through it, they actually feel the process.
Oh yeah, that's amazing. Yeah, because I interviewed somebody that said, she wanted to make sure people could do what she did. So she would go through it and record exactly every step she did, and then she'd send them the video. So she did this with her LinkedIn people and things like that.
It won't work.
It doesn't work well.
So it doesn't work. And after going through this with multiple people and really fleshing over the last couple of months, it's only been about 5 months since I started, but I've seen that there are about 4 components that I've identified as needed to do this properly. So you need the expertise of the person who is the expert, who really knows how to do it properly. You need the knowledge of how to teach it properly. You need the knowledge of how to convert that expertise into that format. So those are the 2 that I handle in the process. And you need a medium, a mechanism to pull the learner through the process effectively. And that's where Skill Builder comes in. And if you're missing any of those 4, the whole thing falls apart. So if you're missing the expertise, you're going to be teaching something that is not useful or helpful or the right way of doing it very well to people, but they're going to end up learning the wrong thing very quickly.
Yes.
If you're missing if you don't know how to teach it effectively, then you're going to be teaching it in a way that they're not going to learn it properly. If you don't have the part of how to convert that, you're going to end up with something that's a kind of a mishmash that is not on point. And if you don't have the platform to take people through it, they're going to have a very broken up experience that is not going to help them learn and pick it up the right thing at the right time in the right way, and so on. But when all 4 of them come together, you get a fluid thing where the person can learn the right thing very quickly.
Wow. Yeah. And that's why, some people can look at like a YouTube video and pick something up and do it. But I think a lot of us really can't. We can get the idea, but like you said, we might be doing it wrong if we're trying to fix our sink when we're breaking the pipes.
The YouTube video route, though, so if you know how to extract the right information from there, it still has its flaws because it doesn't cover all the mistakes people are going to make. It covers how to do it right, but it doesn't cover how to do it wrong, or how to not do it wrong. And sometimes the differences there are really subtle, and even those subtle differences can have huge impacts on the actual final result.
Wow. Well, this has been just a wealth of knowledge. So thank you for sharing. It's just so interesting. And, in this world where there's so much information everywhere and people have to look things up or try and find it because there's just so much to consume, to have something that makes it clear and easy to learn and learn quickly is just so amazing.
Yeah, it's I was meeting with yesterday with someone she's a very successful hairstylist who's built a business on it. She's done like 1,000 videos, training courses online, and she messaged me after saying that this kind of learning is very interesting. It could be like a Pandora's box kind of thing of teaching effectively. And I've had one or two other people say similar things like that, and it's really the most interesting thing is when you actually see people going through it and they're actually able to understand and reproduce the information effectively quickly after going through it.
Mhm. Yeah. So I'm sure there are people at this point, they are just saying, well, where do we get this? So do they come to a website? You have an email? How do people contact you and find out more about you and what you're doing?
Sorry, one sec. My daughter just ran into the room. So,
Oh.
um, she just ran up and hugged onto my leg, and then my wife
Oh.
got her up. Sorry, what was your question?
Oh, I said, if people want to find you and work with you, know more about you, do you have a website or how do they get a hold of you?
My website is skillbuilder.academy. If they are an expert in a given area, then I'm happy to connect with them and see if there's a possible fit. It's not a fit for everything. I can explain that in a second. And they can reach me at jeffz@skillbuilder.academy. If they want to connect, they can connect with me on LinkedIn. And if there are people who want to do it from the learning side of things, then I haven't yet opened up the marketplace because I want to wait till I have a few more workshops so that when people actually search, they see more. I'm going for quality over quantity. I've actually turned away a lot of potential people who just want to do the content or whatever. I don't just want content. I want people who are experts where we can produce something useful, helpful that can really be, each one of them be built into a big thing. So it's not for everyone. There are some courses out there that are theory based, like it's fundamentals of something or whatever, as opposed to skill based. And this is not a good fit for the things that are theory based. It's for the ones that are more skill based, where there's like a methodology involved in doing it right.
Mhm. Okay, beautiful. Well, I'm just going to switch and ask you a personal question.
Sure.
So, what gives you the most happiness and fulfillment in your life at this point?
Family, martial arts, and doing stuff productive, creating interesting things. Yeah, family,
Yeah.
friends, and I have a wife, daughter, and the martial arts, which is a lot harder with COVID. So I have to train at home instead of in the school. And other than that, I like creating interesting things to solve real problems, and that happens to be that software is the way that I'm best at doing that. So,
All right.
yeah.
Well, thank you. And thank you so much for being on the podcast today and for sharing all your really interesting, wonderful ideas and thoughts. And this is going to be huge in the marketplace.
I hope so. And thanks for having me on.
Yeah. So I have one last question before we finish.
Sure.
What is your best advice on creating an incredible, amazing life?
Find people who are positive, that you're happy to be around, who are going to who are not going to bring you down and are going to always kind of help pick you up if you need it, because you're a product of, I think I've heard the 3 people you spend the most time around, and those are what influences you. And find the thing, like the hobbies or things that you like doing most. And because usually if you can become an expert in something that you like doing, then chances are eventually people might want to learn that from you, and you can hopefully make money from doing the thing that you like doing. And if you if you can earn a living from the thing that you like doing, then you can get to the point where it's almost like you're never working, which and that you enjoy what you're doing. So I think that covers the personal side and the professional side both together.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Jeff. And we'll
Thanks for
talk to you
having me.
again soon. You are welcome.